By the way,
What's the hobby?
did you see Kyle? Did you see the Nelk boys they let go of Bob?
Oh yeah, I saw that.
I was just going into a
What's
deep dive.
Nelk?
Cause he's been posting like stories and stuff, just like
Bashing.
calling him out. Like he didn't get his money. Like he was supposed to have ownership of the podcast, and yeah, he's just been going at it. And then I guess Kyle responded to him,
Yesterday I saw on
and
TikTok.
he's like, "I'm just gonna respond once, and like it's done."
And he was breaking it. I didn't know. So Nelk boys are. The Nelk Boys is a YouTube channel where they did pranks, and they're huge, right? Like, in fact, can I get a Hanya from the Nelk Boys, or is that another one?
Let me look him up.
So they do a lot of like grocery store pranks and all that stuff, and they got really big. Then they started a seltzer company called Happy Dad, and they got in with like Dana White and all these other big people, and got very successful. So they started a podcast called Full Send, and it's I don't know their names, but it's Bob. What's the other guy's name?
There's like Kyle.
Kyle, yeah, Kyle.
Salim the Dream.
Mm-hmm.
Celine.
Steve will do it. Yeah, that's another big one. And so they had all these big names on there, and so one of the co-hosts, they let him go recently. Apparently, he just toxic to the group dynamic in terms of productivity.
Ooh.
Tends to party a little too hard, something like that. And everybody's kind of bringing up all this trash towards each other, like, you know, they screwed me here, they screwed me there, and so you just kind of hear both sides of the story. But they were like saying like he was making like $1.2 million signed on to their podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, no, but that's what I was saying. Like
Yeah.
they let him go. He was like a big person part of it.
So
and
he's like
now
putting
there's
them on
this
blast.
he's putting them on blast, and they're blasting back. But when they're blasting back, they're putting things out to be like, so like he says that he got us a bunch of guests, and they showed the screenshot of the three co-hosts or four co-hosts, like who brought which guests, and like it's wild to see the group dynamic and what they're doing there. But
Yikes.
it seems to me that Bob got a little like hungry when it comes to because he was part of the podcast. He was signed onto the podcast. He had commission of like merch sales, which is big. He got a very significant salary per episode. He was doing like 30 G's a month for episodes, but he didn't have ownership of the podcast, and he didn't have any stake in the Happy Dad seltzer. And his whole thing is like, well, if I'm going to be part of this thing, I feel like I'm not even part of it because I'm not part of this Happy Dad seltzer thing. So it's a guy who's trying to get his greedy hand on more money coming in.
Did he come in after they had already had the podcast?
Was it?
No, he was in there from the
From the
beginning.
beginning.
Original?
Mm-hmm. So it came from the beginning, but apparently he's got allegedly, a pretty. He used to have like a coke problem. I think he said that, but he has a party mentality a little too often. Not the whole work hard, play hard, but play hard kind of thing.
Play hard, play hard.
And so Kyle was basically saying that, hey, that's a pretty destructive thing to the group and the productivity. And so they let him go. And so from that point on, he started bashing them. So they started to be like, okay, we're going to lay everything out so people see.
If he's going to throw us under the bus, here's the real.
Exactly. It's funny how people work. Like when people have a self-destructive tendency, it's so rare that people go, you're right, let me get my shit together. But to go, oh, well, my self-destructive tendency like is destroying my life. Now I'm going to make, you guys still, like, I'm still the victim. And that's
very interesting.
It's the same thing with like going back to this whole Sober October, whatever thing. We were just talking with the guys when we were playing golf today, how there's people who go like, well, I drink too often when I go golfing or whatever. Just people in general. And the worst case scenario that happens there is they don't sleep well and they play crappy golf. And then other people, when they drink a little too much or even what ends up happening is now they're doing coke, and next thing you know,
they move on. They spiral really quickly.
But they just do self-destructive tendencies.
Yeah.
So one drink would cause them to have more drinks, and those more drinks will cause them to do cocaine or Molly or other kind of drugs. And the next thing you know, they're doing that very often. So that's destructive to them. Or they keep, getting in the car and driving, or they go get in fights. So they have like a complete self-destructive mechanism inside them. And so do you
think that's something that is just inside people, or do you think that's something that is Developed
like
over
nature or
time.
nurture. Oh, I think it's 100% something inside of somebody. I had a buddy in high school who he close buddy of mine. He told me that, well, this is when we got out of high school, so that's when we were able to have legal alcohol. He told me that every time he drank tequila, he said he would get violent. Like he like, not against other people, that he would like punch his own face. Like he would just kind of, that chemical composition in his body caused him. But he would go have beers and cocktails.
It'd be fine.
Totally
That's
fine.
so weird.
But then tequila would cause him to do that. So that's like a chemical thing inside that person that makes them to do that. But I also think there's also a large part of it is mind strength. I think there's, you know, again, we're not talking about people who are addicted, right? People who are addicted are people who, like, if you take them off any kind of alcohol, they go into withdrawals, right? Those are the people who have to wake up and have what's called an eye opener. That means like they wake up, their body hurts, they have the shakes, they can't see straight, they can't think straight. They have to have a cup of coffee, put some booze in it, and it levels them out. They call those like functional alcoholics. Like they need to be, they're working, they're showing up to work on time, but there's always something in their system just to keep them leveled. Kind of like you have an ADD person who, an ADD kid is so hyperactive that when you give them the right dose of Adderall, which you shouldn't give kids Adderall, but when you give them the right dosage, it levels them out point blank. And so people who are completely addicted to alcohol to the point that they'll have withdrawals, which is not safe, they need it just to be at baseline. And then you have another group of people.
But they've developed that over time.
That's developed over time, correct. They've had it so much in their system that their system doesn't recognize it when it's not in their system, and it's a bad thing. But then you have another group of people who just kind of go in that self-destructive mode. They surround themselves. And I think people have that self-destructive mechanism. A lot of people have it, just not to that extent. So what I mean by it is there's so many people who don't drink, but they're surrounded by toxic people around their life, and their life is constantly in shambles and drama and broken relationships and negativity, just because they surround themselves around people who bring that negative energy. If you're quick to cut that off, then you go, cool, now I'm around positive people. I mean, you've told me this before. Like, you go on trips with girls and be like, this is a group of people, because they weren't talking crap about their husbands, they weren't gossiping or anything. That's just like a self-destructive mechanism that people tend to be in, like whether or not they attract drama and let it be there, or they recognize drama and cut it out.
I hate drama.
I hate drama. So I think that's what ends up happening. I think it's totally a mentality of that person.
Yeah.
There's people who will have a drink and get to work, like not go to work, but like being productive, and they're still getting things done. And there's people who have a drink, and next thing you know, they're just sitting on the couch and they're just drinking and drinking and drinking.
Right.
And that's their mind, and life gets destroyed.
Hey, thanks for watching our Next Door Neighbors podcast.
And be sure to capture the full episode anywhere podcasts are streamed, and including our YouTube channel, Next Door Neighbors.